How are you guys all doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Today is October 21st, almost through the entirety of Week 7 here, but we're going to go over what we saw yesterday. A great slate of games, a handful of great games that we saw. We're going to talk about the Sunday Night Football matchup, obviously, with Russell Wilson impressing, the Jets not so much. Then also we're going to talk about the Lions and the Vikings game, a great game from two teams that I believe are the best in the NFC. We're going to talk about Saquon's revenge game, and we're going to preview the two Monday Night Football games on tonight. That is what's on today's menu, so make sure to stick around for all of that. And before we get started, I'd like to remind you guys, if you want to be part of the conversation, want to make any questions, comments, or share your opinions, don't hesitate to do so. Your input is a big part of what makes this show great, and we thrive on your energy and insights. So if you want to make it absolutely sure that your message stands out and you want to be featured on the show, there's an easy way to do that just by using the new Super Chat feature. Just click the $sign at the bottom of the chat box to send in your Super Chat, and this way it guarantees that your message gets on the air, and it's also a fantastic way to support our channel. So we rely on your support to keep bringing you the sports content you love, and we always appreciate it when you guys are able to do that. So go ahead and let us know what you're thinking. Hit the Super Chat button, and let's keep this show as interactive and exciting as possible. Make sure to use that Super Chat feature. Get involved in the conversation because there's a lot of good games going on, and there's a lot to comment on them. So make sure to do that to be involved with the show. But now we can review a little bit, preview the games that we have coming up, starting with the early game tonight, looking at the game between the Buccaneers and the Baltimore Ravens. One of the two Monday Night Football games on tonight, this one being the first one at 8:15 Eastern Time. Kickoff is set around there. The Ravens will travel down to Tampa Bay to face the Buccaneers. Both enter this game at 4-2. Baltimore, on one hand, is on a 4-game win streak, while on the other hand, Tampa Bay has been alternating between wins and losses over the last 5 weeks. So a tale of two paths to get here to 4-2. But both, something to feature in this game features two first-round quarterbacks from the 2018 draft. Baker Mayfield obviously being drafted number 1 overall to Cleveland that year, and on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have Lamar Jackson taken with the very last pick of that year's draft, and now they meet again here in tonight's contest, so that's a little bit interesting to keep an eye on. Also, speaking about Lamar and his just trajectory, entering this game, he has a 22-1 record against NFC teams up until this point. He's 2-0 against the Buccaneers as well, and that record, the 22-1 record, is the best record by a quarterback against an opposing conference in NFL history. Quite literally never losing to NFC teams in his career is Lamar Jackson. We'll see if the Bucs can beat Lamar for the first time since he's been in the NFL, with Baker there now as their quarterback. And speaking of Baltimore, we're going to look at them first and just give an overview of what kind of monster we're dealing with, right? Because they have been really just bullying and running over teams up until this point through the first 6 weeks of the NFL. They lead the NFL with 1,232 rushing yards. They have run for at least 150 yards and scored a rushing touchdown in every game so far. That's 150 yards combined, at least between Lamar, Derek, and Justice Hill, probably the three most common runners. While individually, Derrick Henry leads all running backs with 704 rushing yards, and they're trying to stay ahead, of Pittsburgh, who currently is right now leading the AFC North because they have played already. They're at 5-2, so the Ravens wanting to keep pace with that in tonight's game, trying to also go to 5-2 and reclaim that top spot. And in terms of injuries, I haven't seen any updates on inactives or active players tonight. I still know that for the Ravens, they have names like Broderick Washington, a defensive tackle that's not playing tonight, Malik Harrison, a linebacker that's out tonight, and Arthur Marlette, who is still, coming back from the IR. He is inactive for tonight's game. So, not too major injuries for the Ravens thus far. And also, with most of their starters playing, and obviously Derrick Henry getting most of the attention. Somebody else to keep an eye on is Zay Flowers. He's coming off of a career performance last week against Washington. I think coming into this game, I would have tallied Zay Flowers as the number one wide receiver for them. And I think he's taken a more mature step this year, if that makes sense, right? I feel like he's more assured, and there's a better connection with him and Lamar, and it was really at his peak last week where they played the Commanders, and it was a pretty close game all in all, given the circumstance and how the game ultimately played out. It was pretty close, so they needed all of that production from Zay Flowers, and we'll see how he follows it up tonight against the not too stout Tampa Bay defense in tonight's game. So we'll see how he tries to build off of that performance for the Baltimore Ravens. But now shifting over to the Buccaneers, where I mentioned just that their defense might not be the most relied upon, the one that's most stout in the NFL, but talking about offense, the Bucs are among the best in the NFL. They just put up 51 points on the New Orleans Saints last week in Spencer Rattler's first start in New Orleans, if I'm not mistaken, and they're one of the NFL's highest scoring teams. They're averaging about 29.7 points per game at this juncture, and although that is who they are right now offensively, we have seen them struggle a little bit against Denver's defense, a little bit in their home loss to the Broncos, which was pretty surprising. So there's a bit of a caveat there, I guess, with the Bucs, for as potent and just very versatile that their offense is, with Godwin, Evans, Trey Palmer, if he's able to play tonight, and the running backs as well. If they're all able to go, they pose a threat as well. But Baltimore's defense maybe hasn't been as shut down as it was last year, but still, they're able to put pressure on the quarterbacks and still make plays, regardless of maybe giving up more points this year, but they do make the timely stops more often than not. Looking at the game against the Bills, where they completely shut out the Bills, and also more recently against the Commanders, just making the timely stops to create that separation, right? Bending but not breaking, having the Commanders kick 3 points. Maybe they drive on them, but they only hold them to 3 points, and their offense scores touchdowns, right? And that's how you create that bit of separation, and that's pretty much all you need in today's NFL. You don't need to hold teams to like 15 or at most 17 points. It's very hard to do now in the NFL. So the fact that the Ravens, have a good complementary relationship between both sides is one of the reasons why they're so tough. And the Buccaneers are going to have to maybe be overpowered on offense or get a little bit more out of their defense in tonight's matchup, which could be without a couple key guys. The inactives haven't been updated as of yet from what I can tell so far while I'm looking at it here in live time. But for right now, what the injury report says, Trey Palmer is questionable with a concussion. He may or may not play tonight, trying to recover off of that. He's questionable. Also, Rachaad White is questionable with a foot injury, and their biggest one of all, Vita Vea, is also questionable. He's expected to play, though, according to this report 4 hours ago. He's expected to play tonight against the Ravens, so that's the biggest one, in my opinion, for obvious reasons, right? Trying to stop the running game. He's expected to play while he's trying to recover, or has recovered, from a hamstring injury that has ailed him a little bit over the last couple weeks, but he's expected to play. That's great news for the Buccaneers. And now, with both of those, now we have everything laid out on the table, looking at some key matchups to keep track of while we're watching the game tonight to determine a winner, because I believe these things will determine it. Obviously, will be the Buccaneers defensive line against Hunter Henry and that running game, including Lamar Jackson. It's always interesting to see how teams game plan, whether they're going to have a spy on Lamar, whether they're just going to pack up the box and leave the receivers wide open a little bit, or more favorable matchups. That's what Washington did, and it almost ended up working for them. But, like we talked about, Baltimore's defense came up with some timely stops. So how they managed that relationship on defense and offense, and how often they switch it up, obviously, too. I'll also be interested to see how much they blitz as well and get in Lamar's face to see how he responds to that. But really, the defensive line with Vita Vea, now that we know, is going to be huge. And it's night and day what the Buccaneers are able to do on run defense with Vita Vea there. So it's great that he's going to be in there for them. And elsewhere, the Buccaneers wide receivers, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, against this Baltimore Ravens secondary, which again hasn't looked so, locked down. They have a rookie playing in Nate Wiggins, and you still have the Marlon Humphreys of the world and the Kyle Hamiltons and stuff like that. But if you look at some of their losses and against closer oppositions, the Commanders were able to do something with, great receiving talent like Terry McLaurin. The Raiders beat them with big games from Brock Bowers and Devontae Adams while he was still there. And even the Cowboys, for what it's worth, they were able to drive the ball down a little bit on them. So this Bucs team is just as explosive as any offense. So I'll be interested to see how successful they will be in tonight's matchup. Evans and specifically Godwin as well, because I feel like he's been gaining a lot of momentum recently. He's been playing very good. So those are the two matchups. But in the end, I don't like picking the obvious choice with Baltimore. But then again, like, the Bucs are so unpredictable, and I could easily see this game being just back and forth offensively, and the Ravens could just blitz the heck out of Baker and really try to make him under pressure and just overwhelm him early on. And then from that point, if that is the case, that it's pretty tough for any team to come back on the Ravens when they possess the ball so well. So for that reason, I think I'm just going to go with Baltimore. I feel like I'm making more excuses to go with Baltimore for right now. So I feel like they're just more assured of who they are. I'm a little bit doubtful of who else can kind of step up for this Buccaneers offense. And with what I've seen from the Ravens and their defense, I trust them a little bit more. Lamar's playing on an unbelievable level with Derrick Henry. And I feel like they just can edge them out a little bit more. I can rely upon them more to make bigger plays, albeit on the road. So we're going to go with the Ravens in tonight's first game. It's going to be probably the best one, because the other one, not to say that, but that's not the only game, obviously, that we have on tonight's slate. We're going to talk about the later kickoff at 9 p.m. Eastern Time between the Chargers and the Arizona Cardinals. We're going to talk about that, preview that right after the break, so don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my.
Back here now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to get to the second game that we have on tonight. I think I like the Monday Night Football doubleheaders a lot more. It feels more like a Sunday when there's a couple games going on and you can check both of them at the same time. When it's one, it has more eyeballs on it, but I feel like there's more risk kind of when there's only one game on. And if it's a dud, it kind of ruins it. But the Monday Night Football doubleheaders, I think, should be around a lot more. But with that being the case, looking at this matchup now between the Chargers and the Cardinals, the later game set to start at 9 p.m. Eastern Time over here. This almost certain it's the first one ever to be exclusively on ESPN+, so that's exciting for you guys that have ESPN+. Hopefully, for those who don't, you can still watch it somehow. But yeah, this is a later game between the Chargers and the Cardinals. Two teams that are still nowhere near the finished product, but have definitely shown major steps forward, major strides in trying to build the ideal image of what they see each of their teams being. And we have the Chargers coming into Arizona at 3-2, And the Cardinals facing a bit more of a must-win scenario because they're 2-4 now, hosting the Chargers. The Chargers, Arizona, just came off of a tough loss to the Green Bay Packers as well last week in Green Bay. And the Chargers, coming off of their bye week, if I'm not mistaken, also just beat a tough Denver defense, right? After back-to-back losses that they had, they came in, they won that game, and are getting a bit healthier now, where after that Steelers game, they had a couple injuries to Joe Alt. Justin Herbert got dinged up a little bit more, but it looks like, hopefully, for their sake going forward, it looks like they're getting healthier, so that's a great thing to see. Also, like I said with both of these teams, both of them, especially the Cardinals, because the Cardinals are a bit more of a, very varied team where one week we see them beat the Rams, blow out the Rams at home, and then other weeks we see them also be in close games with the 49ers, and they won both of those games, and they're their 2 wins so far on the year. And then there's other games where they just get handed the business pretty much. And this is still a team that hasn't won back-to-back games since 2021, and it's a interesting scenario, really, just because of how many good players they have, based on the fact that, we're talking about Marvin Harrison Jr., we're talking about Kyler showing a bit more flash this year, I think showing a bit more of a consistent play in some of these games, right? Other games have been a bit hit or miss, but, James Conner's still there, and Michael Wilson's kind of making a name for himself as well, so there's a bit of those flashes, and I want to believe more in this team, but it's a bit too varied, and I think that comes with obviously trying to build this team that they're trying to build being so early on in this process up until this point. But elsewhere, looking at the Chargers now, with Jim Harbaugh coming back, he's back in the NFL, back coaching where he used to play with the Chargers. He's actually 6-0 during his 4 seasons with the 49ers on Monday Night Football. So take that as you will for anything you want to do with that information. And the Chargers have the 3rd highest run rate so far in the NFL. Why does that matter? Because the Arizona Cardinals have the 4th worst run defense in the NFL so far. So very favorable in the side of the Chargers so far, kind of foreshadowing to what we're going to talk about. But looking at the Chargers a little bit here, in a bit more of a deeper look, talking about injuries, we talked about how they're getting a bit healthier, but also they placed Gus Edwards and Asante Samuel Jr. on the IR recently. They have a few more weeks before they are off of it, and one of their wide receivers, DJ Chark, actually, he was on the IR to start the year, and just according to some of the reports, I'm pretty sure he's expected to play tonight, or actually not this week. He wasn't activated off of the IR yet. He's getting close, but he will probably be held off for a week or 2 more. And from the injury standpoints, from inactive and active, that probably won't come out until later, obviously, because this one's the later kickoff. So we'll have to wait probably towards the end of the show, I would say. Hopefully they're in by then. But yeah, unfortunately, no DJ Chark. They're going to roll out with the same guys they have been so far. And other than that, it's a great sign still to see other guys getting healthy. It looks like Justin Herbert's ankle sprain and any sort of issues he's had with that seem to be in the past now, hopefully. Hopefully that doesn't get tweaked or anything like that going forward, because that kind of, looking at it in the Chargers, or the Chargers and the Steelers game, really, where it really limited their offense, obviously, with Herbert being a bit hobbled out there. Then he got hit in that ankle and he had to come out. It's really something that you can't mess around with too much, especially obviously playing football and how delicate the high ankle sprains are. But it looks like he has gone a little bit past it now. It looks like he's a bit better, a bit more secure in that ankle, so that's great to see. And yeah, the Chargers are on course, I would say, overall, from what we'd expect, from the growing pains, from having a guy like Jim Harbaugh leading them. I think we'd say they're right around where we'd hope they'd be. But the Arizona Cardinals on the other side, dealing with some injuries for their side, a bit more severe, really all season, because they had 2 of their better defensive linemen, Justin Jones and Bilal Nichols. They've been out the whole year with some pretty severe injuries that they suffered early on. So that's in the NFL, and having guys like this in their ranks, right there leading the line, obviously makes a huge difference. So the fact that they're not in there, it is noticeable. Obviously, it is noticeable when they play. And their defensive back, Sean Murphy-Bunting, is also questionable with a neck injury. Again, they're probably going to hold it off a little bit longer towards closer to kickoff. But he is a threat to not play tonight because of that neck injury. And like we mentioned before, the Cardinals are 2-4 right now. This is a higher stakes game for them. And although the Chargers want to keep building on this, they want to keep building some sort of momentum. For the Cardinals, to drop to 2-5 then, and I mean, the way the 49ers are playing, and the Rams, I'm pretty sure, are 2-4, 2-5 also. It's not totally out of it with how up and down that division has been, but you can tell when you're looking at the Seahawks or even the Rams to some extent, and definitely the 49ers, that you can see a clearer picture of what they are as a team or what kind of philosophy, identity they want to have. It's not really the same with the Cardinals, and to fall to 2-5 and be further in a hole, I think that would be a lot more devastating to them than it would be for the Chargers to lose tonight. But the Chargers, they can drop a game here or two. It hasn't been overly convincing, but at the same time, they I feel like a lot more assured of who they are as a team. And why I say that also is because you look at this team, and something that I wanted to point out certainly was the fact that so far through the year, you look at these two splits, 127 pass attempts to 153 carries for the Chargers, and you might not think that matters too much, but I think it's really significant to point out because it shows sort of a shift in this philosophy that I think Jim Harbaugh brings. And how effective was it going to be? That was the big question, right? But so far, like I said, being 3-2 for this Chargers team, you're right around that sweet spot where you want to be, with a chance to be 4-2 this year. And there's a lot of teams right now in the NFL that are 4-2, and for the Chargers to be in that mix, executing their philosophy how they want it to be, very run heavy, offensive line dependent, not having Justin Herbert throw like 30 times a game. They're doing that based on the numbers, and it's resulted in some performances like you see out of J.K. Dobbins. He sort of rejuvenated himself with this offense, finding a home here in Los Angeles alongside Jim Harbaugh and his ideas. It's a great thing to see, and that's where my assurance comes with the Chargers a bit more, because it seems like they have a clear plan. They've been adamant about it, and they're executing on it at all fronts. So that's why I'm feeling a bit more confident about the Chargers tonight. I am going to predict them to win, just because, again, it feels like they're just on a different level right now. They've hit their stride a little bit more than the Cardinals. I'm sure the Cardinals, you'd think they'd be favored at home because they've gotten some big wins at home. They blew out the Rams at home, and still, it's the Chargers' just way of controlling the pace of play. They only really logistically have to focus on Marvin Harrison on that offensive side of themselves. It's Marvin Harrison Jr. It's not like the Chargers who have, to be fair, the Chargers don't have guys that jump out of the page either, but you know what I mean. I feel like the Chargers know a little bit more of how to get the ball to their guys. They scheme them open, per se, rather than the Cardinals do. It looks a bit cleaner for them. But looking at the key matchups here to explain why I could feel a little bit more comfortable about the Chargers is a matchup between James Conner and the defensive line for the Chargers, because this offense is so hit or miss, because it's so hot and cold at times for the Cardinals, whether or not they can get the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr., they're going to need a guy like James Conner to play better, quite honestly, because he hasn't really been as dominant as he has in maybe a game or two here, but it hasn't really maintained a steady level all year. And James Conner, funny enough, on Monday Night Football, he has 6 touchdowns in 6 Monday Night Football games, 3 of them being with the Cardinals. So it gives you a bit more hope there for the Cardinals to keep it close, because James Conner just performs pretty well on Monday Night Football. So that'll be a matchup that, if the Chargers also win that one and they're able to control the game through their running game, it's going to look very one-sided if the Cardinals can't even fight back with their own running back. So that'll be one to keep track of as well as the Chargers wide receivers against this secondary for the Cardinals, because last week we saw the Packers have really no issue throwing at will wherever they wanted to all over this secondary, and they got out to a big lead because of it. So are the Chargers able to do the same thing? Do they want to do the same thing? Or maybe they just want to pound the rock with the running game and kind of beat them up that way and then open up easier throws. It'll be interesting. It's not going to look like the Packers' way of attacking just because the Packers are so pass heavy, but it's something to keep track of because then you're incorporating motions, play actions, and how the secondary reacts to that, how disciplined they are to their assignments, and not being too focused on getting caught looking in the backfield. It's all revolved around this matchup, the Chargers wide receivers and the secondary for the Cardinals. So those two are my key matchups. I said I'm going to pick the Chargers to win on the road. I like their style of play a bit more, and it's the run-heavy teams that I feel like have a bit more success, and that's what the Chargers are trying to be. They've been pretty successful, so I think it continues in tonight's game. We got the Chargers in one game, predicting them to win, and like I said before, the Ravens will win the other game. We'll see if both road teams win in those matchups like I am predicting. But moving past the games tonight and backtracking to Sunday, we got 3 games I wanted to go over to start the week, while obviously looking for the rest of the week and recapping some more games because there were so many you couldn't fit them all in today's show. We're going to start off with the Sunday night football game that we saw last night. A pretty surprising result for both sides, right? The Steelers actually winning and Russ looking very good. And surprising on the other side, I'd say too, because the Jets, with the reunion and everything and everybody feeling good, the way that they played was very surprising as well. So we're going to break that all down, and I'll give you guys my thoughts on it when we return in just a few seconds.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Back here now on the Chip Shot Football Podcast to start looking back at the games that we saw yesterday. There was a lot of good ones on. Like I said before, we couldn't fit them all on today's episode, but still, with that being the case, we're going to talk about the Sunday night football game, right? Obviously, an anticipated one still, obviously, because of the fact that we had some very interesting storylines heading into that game. We had the Steelers coming in at 4-2, riding off of a pretty convincing win, you could say, over the Raiders. Not the toughest of competitions, but still, it all boiled down to the quarterback controversy, right? Will Justin Fields continue? And we got that answer a couple times last week. Based on the answers Mike Tomlin gave, he left the door open for Justin Fields to start, and then through some further interviews, it felt like it was getting clear that Russ was going to start. Why else would you give him first team reps? But it was the best. It was the best when they asked George Pickens about it. I think it was like Thursday or Friday or something like that, when Mike Tomlin, quite literally that same day, said that he made a decision, but they were going to keep it in-house. And in that same day, I swear, it was George Pickens asked about working extra time with Russell Wilson, and he said that, yeah, he's been doing that because it's his first start coming up this week or something like that, just basically giving it away. The same day that Mike Tomlin just said that they were going to keep it in-house, just a complete, face palm moment there, from George, dang, George, you couldn't just, say it a different way. But regardless of the fact, it was pretty obvious. All George pretty much did was confirm it, but it was just funny how it all played out there on that same day. And it was Russ's first start as one storyline, but also the reunion between Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers, what everybody thought would be a seamless transition, just a Green Bay 2.0 from what we saw the last few years. It really wasn't that at all. It really struggled to get going. Russ, in his first start for the Steelers, spoiled the reunion for the Jets and Rodgers and Davante Adams. Pittsburgh reclaimed the top spot in the division just for right now because they are standing at 5-2, waiting on the results of this Ravens game that we have going on tonight. Also, while the Jets lose their fourth straight game in a row, they fall to 2-5, the opposite of the Steelers, and they're one game away from last place in the AFC East, which is insane because if you look at the chain of events from the beginning of just this year, if you would have told anybody that the Jets would have fired Robert Saleh, brought in Davante Adams, and they'd still be 2-5, it would just be like, what the heck would have happened in those 7 weeks for all of that to be true? And now that we know, it doesn't take away from how just spontaneous and just crazy these last couple of weeks have been for the Jets, trying everything, a lot of different, attempts at solving this problem that they have with their offense, and none of it has really worked so far. And it is unfortunate just because I want to see this work because I didn't hate the Davante Adams trade. I just hated the fact that they were playing the Steelers the first week. Like, they couldn't have waited one more week for this to happen or just have it happen the week before. So I wasn't taken so off guard. But the fact that it played so well for the Steelers was great to see, being a Steelers fan. But still, the way it happened, it was very uncanny just because it was so underwhelming for the Jets offense. And getting to the Jets offense a little bit in just a second, this is the first time since 2020 that the Steelers have put up 30-plus points in consecutive weeks in the regular season. And after a 15-6 deficit that the Steelers found themselves in last night, they scored 31 straight points right after that to win 37-15. Unrecognizable from this team really all season long, where it's been just a huge effort to get this team to play clean-looking offense, and we got the epitome of that for as much as the Steelers can provide that last night. And on the other side, like I said, the offense for the Jets hasn't really been there. Rodgers threw 2 more interceptions last night, which brought him to a total of 7, which I believe is the 4th most in the NFL right now, and he's on pace to throw 17 if he keeps this up, which would be the most in his career, surpassing his current most at 13 from his rookie year. So that's the kind of, I think, worry level that we would have with the Jets offense if we're talking about career lows for Aaron Rodgers. It's not anywhere you'd like to be, obviously, if you're a Jets fan. And talking about the interceptions and things like that, looking at some of the better performances, I think we'd have to start, obviously, with Russell Wilson in his first start. He blew out all expectations, I think, that a lot of people had of him, finishing 16 of 29, 264 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was only sacked 1 time, which that was a big problem or a big potential problem that a lot of people pointed out. The fact that he wasn't as mobile, the fact that the offensive line hasn't looked great, the receivers weren't really creating a lot of separation. So how was a older, more immobile Russell Wilson going to fare? But he was only sacked 1 time, so credit to him, but also credit to the offensive line for stepping up in that regard. Najee Harris had another great game. That's back-to-back weeks now where Najee's been looking very impressive. Against the Raiders, he had 106 yards and a touchdown. And last night, he had 102 yards, another touchdown on 21 carries. Jaylen Warren also looking a bit better after he was dealing with some injury problems. And receiving-wise, the best game so far of George Pickens is 2024 season. He had 5 receptions, 111 yards, and 1 touchdown. Pat Freiermuth had a decent day. Calvin Austin only had 1 reception, but I feel like it was made more of an effort to get him going. Van Jefferson finally contributed with a touchdown on a nice play there in the red zone. It all looked very efficient, so credits for the Steelers for that. While on the other side, the Jets not as explosive as you would have thought, just in the short term of seeing Davante get there and having all these high hopes. Aaron Rodgers finished 24 of 39, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. He was also only sacked 1 time, while Breece Hall started off very well. He had a great day receiving-wise. He had 6 receptions for 103 yards, and on the ground, maybe not so effective, 12 carries for 38 yards, but he scored a rushing touchdown as well. Davante Adams in his debut, while he has a great relationship with Aaron Rodgers, fitting into this new environment, he only finished with 3 receptions for 30 yards. I'm pretty sure he had no receptions in the entire second half. Garrett Wilson had the leading numbers as the receiver with 5 receptions for 61 yards, but obviously had that big drop that led to the second interception for Aaron Rodgers. So that was, a lot of things went wrong for the Jets in that matchup. And looking at how the game sort of broke down, Pittsburgh actually led this game at 3-0, but offensively, the way that it looked, just based on the eye test, there was a lot of boos starting to rain down on this offense after a few drives where 3 straight drives where they punted to start the game. They got a field goal in their first drive, but after that they really struggled to get anything going, and all while the Steelers struggled to get the bus rolling, the Jets took advantage and scored that touchdown by Breece Hall. Now they led it 7-3, and then to make matters worse, the Steelers only respond with another field goal while the Jets drive down and Aaron Rodgers throws a touchdown near the goal line to Tyler Conklin. And that whole weird scenario with the challenge flag, whether or not Breece Hall scored, Jeff Ulbrich throwing the challenge flag on the field, Rodgers throwing it off the field, it was all very weird. And I didn't think it was such a big deal that the Jets weren't going to score, and they converted anyway, and they led 15-6 in that first half, or in the second quarter actually. Then Pittsburgh punted after that drive, and it looked like at that moment where Pittsburgh punted again after the Jets had just scored, to me watching the game, I'm thinking, this is pretty much it here. If they score a touchdown, it's going to be an early nail in the coffin sort of game, right? Because if they score and they go up to 22-6, I would have found it very hard for this Steelers team to come back. But what was huge about that was that interception by Beanie Bishop over the middle of the field that obviously from that point on led to a touchdown by the Steelers. It was George Pickens, if I'm not mistaken, on that nice fade route. Great throw by Russell Wilson to get George Pickens in the end zone. And instead of being 22-6, it's 15-13 going into halftime. And it's a huge deal. It's a huge deal, obviously, because of that. And then the same thing occurred in the second half. After Pittsburgh started with a field goal to take the lead, 16-15, Rodgers threw another interception, like I said, a very costly one by Garrett Wilson. It just hit him in the chest. It popped up, and Beanie Bishop is there once again to catch his second interception, and he was able to return it almost all the way before Davante Adams hawked him down like DK Metcalf hawking down Budda Baker on that one play. He brought him down on the one. Russell Wilson scored a rushing touchdown, so the Steelers took a very surprising 23-15 lead and a huge swing of momentum. And then from that point on, it was all Pittsburgh from there. The Jets really started to kind of dig themselves in a hole with penalties. With after that drive that Russell Wilson scored, they settled for a field goal, which was blocked, and of course it kind of summed up everything that was going on in that game for the Jets. And after that field goal was blocked, of course, the Steelers go down and score another touchdown to Van Jefferson, really making it 30-15. And the Jets one last gasp at trying to come back. They don't convert on a 4th down play, and the Steelers right after that, to make matters worse, they go on a 13-play drive, and Najee Harris punches it in there at the end to make it 37-15. Just really, really steamrolling the Jets there in the second half. And all of Pittsburgh's 4 drives in that second half led to points. 3 straight touchdown drives and also that field goal to start that second half. The Jets went scoreless from the 5:30 mark left in the second quarter. They never scored another point after that. And it's a huge credit, obviously, again, to Russell Wilson for coming in, overcoming the boo. Apologize to Mike Tomlin for questioning, having any sort of hesitancy for him making this decision. Mike Tomlin, the report said that he was pretty much the lone wolf in making this decision, right? It was his sort of hunch, his belief that he wanted to see Russ do something, that he believed that he can contribute something, maybe something that we hadn't seen from Fields, and it took a lot. It was a big risk, obviously, because this is a way that you could lose a locker room if you make this decision with everybody wanting to see Fields play, and if it doesn't work out and you get like blown out at home, it's a loss that a lot of players would feel like would be on the coach for making a change like that. But Russ balls out and he plays great again. I'll never question the decision Mike Tomlin makes ever again for this change. It took a lot to make it, albeit who he is and the kind of resume he has, obviously still a big risk to take, but of course it pans out for him, being Mike Tomlin and all. And the Jets had a few injuries to their defense, but it hasn't really looked the same, honestly, since Robert Saleh left. And I don't want to blame that on Jeff Ulbrich. I think he was just put in a bad situation where he was elevated, and then now they're still expected to make the Super Bowl. When that move was made, I said it's too sporadic to kind of believe that from making the change to Jeff Ulbrich to adding Devontae Adams to now having Hassan Reddick back in, it's too all over the place. It's too impulsive and sporadic to one, think you're going to win a Super Bowl just the week right after making that decision. But this team doesn't have time on their side, so it's not a good mix to make everything so sudden and think that you have the wherewithal or all this time to make it all work. It's not. It doesn't match up for the Jets, and I think we're seeing it in some of these struggles where they have some of these penalties, or it looks like they're not on the same page, or the defense doesn't look quite ready yet. It's kind of weird to point out, but there were certainly some missed chances on offense by this Jets team. Like I said, the lack of chemistry, albeit all those years that Devontae and Russ were together, there's still some rust to try and get accustomed to this new environment. And the turnovers, right? If you don't win the turnover battle, it's hard to win anywhere in the National Football League. So that's something else that they have to fix. The drop passes, obviously, to Garrett Wilson, the penalties and things like that, some missed throws by Aaron Rodgers, all of that they still have to clean up. And their defense, I think, most of all, has to start, kind of taking some pride within themselves and start making some stops, because in some of these games, they gave up almost 30 points to the Vikings. They just gave up over 30 points to the Steelers, who haven't been this sort of juggernaut on offense. It's weird because this defense was supposed to be the anchor to this team while Aaron Rodgers, made his way back. So while the offense certainly has a lot of problems to get over, I think this defense has been pretty underwhelming as far, and the quicker they fix that, I think it'll help out this offense a lot more to have that blanket, much like the Steelers do with their defense. And making a change like the quarterback position was never easy. But the Steelers take this one, they go to 5-2. They'll play the Giants, another New York team, on Monday Night Football a week from tonight. But the Jets should get back to winning ways next week, hopefully, against the New England Patriots. But if they don't, that'll be a whole different problem once and if we get there. But that's still a ways away. We have a couple more games to get to on today's show. One of them that I tallied as one of, if not the best game of the weekend, the Lions and the Vikings certainly did not disappoint. The two best teams, in my opinion, in the NFC went head-to-head, and the Lions got a last-second victory over the Vikings at home. We're going to break that down, go over everything that happened, and what we learned about the Lions and the Vikings. So that is coming up. We'll be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
We are back now on the show to continue looking over some of these games that we had in last night's full slate of games, which was one of the best slates I would say that we've had, and I feel like I always say that now with a lot of these games because, like going back a few weeks now, we talked about how everything is so close, and this one was certainly one game that felt like there was a lot more on the line because it was a divisional game, only the second NFC North matchup between any of these teams in the division. The Lions playing against the Minnesota Vikings, the game of the week between two of the best NFC and two of the best NFL teams, I feel like, just in general, through the first 7 weeks. And the Lions came out on top. The Lions just edged out the Vikings on the road 31-29. In which the Lions go to first place now over the Minnesota Vikings in that division. Same record, but because of that head-to-head record, the Lions now go to first place at 5-1, while the Vikings suffer their first loss, dropping, but they're still 5-1, which is insane, and technically second in the division, obviously, now. And I think this game, unlike other games that we're going to talk about later in the week, this one had just all offense really throughout the entire game. A lot of prolific performances on offense, and really none more than some of these guys I will show you here on the screen. None more than these two guys for the Lions. And why were they so successful? It was because of their quarterback, Jared Goff. He recorded his third straight game without a turnover or without any turnovers, and a 140-plus passer rating so far this season. And with that being the case, he joins Aaron Rodgers in 2011, Kurt Warner in 1999, and Roger Staubach in 1971 as the only quarterbacks to do that through 3 straight games, to not throw any turnovers, and to have a passer rating of 140 plus through those 3 games. So Jared Goff quietly playing as clean as football as you would have ever imagined. And it's weird because a couple weeks ago we talked about how he had more interceptions than passing touchdowns at one point after that Bucs game, I want to say. And now he's been as flawless as you could have asked for. You know, you have this game, you had that game where he went perfect, 18 of 18 against the Seahawks, I believe, at home, and it's been awesome to see, and it's been the driving force for this Lions team. This 31 points by Detroit was the most given up by arguably one of the best, if not the best, defense in the NFL for the Vikings, and it was truly impressive. And we had the performances by these two guys on the screen. You know, you look at Jahmyr Gibbs, 116 rushing yards on 15 carries, 2 rushing touchdowns after David Montgomery. I think it was his first game all year where he didn't score a touchdown, and Jahmyr Gibbs stepped up in a big way. David Montgomery also got hurt in this game. I don't think it was anything serious. He did come back, but it did stop him a little bit. But Jahmyr picked up the slack and had a couple big runs. He had a 45-yard run as well that changed the dynamic a lot of this game. Also, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I think just another quiet performer that is so consistent in the NFL each and every week. He's putting up crazy numbers. In this one, 8 receptions, 112 yards, and a touchdown. And Jared Goff, I didn't actually get to his stats. He was 22 of 25. He has 280 yards and 2 touchdowns, which is, again, another clean game. Only throwing three incompletions is pretty nuts so far. And if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw some crazy stat where he has more touchdowns than incompletions or something like that over the last few weeks. It was something like that, which is insane. Just harping on my point again about Jared Goff, but we had that on one side, but it wasn't too far off on the other side also for the Vikings, where Sam Darnold had an interception, but he also threw a touchdown. He threw for 259 yards, and we talk about the incompletions for Jared Goff. Sam Darnold only had 5 of them. He was 22 of 27. And that's not to go on too much of a tangent, but those are 2 big reasons why these 2 teams, I believe, are so highly tout in the NFL, at least in my opinion, right? We're talking about efficient, clean football, and why these games are so entertaining is because we see that to the fullest extent with these 2 quarterbacks playing like they are, being as blemish-free as you would love to see in the NFL. It's great to see in the NFC North. And in the running game, Aaron Jones had a pretty solid day. 93 yards, had that one touchdown to start things off, and 14 carries. And Justin Jefferson, pretty good game as well. He had 81 yards, 7 receptions, and a touchdown. Jalen Naylor also contributed. Jordan Addison. TJ Hawkinson should also be coming back in a few weeks as well. He's getting close to a return. But yeah, looking at this game and how it played out, it was like a tale of two halves, really, because Detroit surprised a lot, I'm sure, just right off of the bat, trying to fake punt on their first drive, and it didn't work, obviously, and that failed, and that led to Minnesota having great field position and scoring a touchdown to start things off. It was 7-0 after that, and Detroit punted 2 more times after that, but Minnesota only got 3 points off of those 3 points. But, it was still a 10-0 lead, which proved to be pretty costly because Detroit flipped a 180-degree switch in that second quarter, and they had an awesome stretch of drives in that second quarter where they scored 3 straight touchdowns to make it 21-10, just like that, in an instant, holding Minnesota scoreless after that field goal that made it 10 points for them. They scored 3 straight touchdowns, and it just in a flash, you kind of didn't know how we got to 21-10 at that point, but it was so sudden that happened. And then also in the second quarter, it was great because it started with a touchdown for the Minnesota Vikings, or by each, I should say, to make the score 28-17. And the Vikings needed something to happen, obviously, on the defensive side to try and steal momentum back, because after giving up 3 straight touchdowns like that, you put your defense in a spot where, all right, quite fairly, honestly, you put them in a spot that they kind of got themselves in by allowing 3 straight touchdowns. They need to respond now and, make something up after that, because the offense, for whatever reason, they were struggling. Credit to the Lions as well for creating those struggles. But the defense needed to come up with something, right? It was 28-17, and at that point, Minnesota took momentum back after a field goal to make it 28-20. Detroit punted 2 more times after that, and the Vikings defense started to hold a bit more. And after those 2 punts, they had a fumble return for a touchdown late there in the game, which made it 28-19. The Vikings went for a 2-point conversion, but they failed. But still, they hit a field goal, made it 28-23, and then they had that touchdown on that fumble return, making it 29-28. But Minnesota, albeit, they had the lead. Obviously, the ball went back to the Lions. They forced the Lions to punt again, but at that point, Minnesota could have drive to be the last one, right, and just put it to bed, but they couldn't convert on a third down throw that Sam Darnold couldn't hit Justin Jefferson. So they left a lot of time. They went 3 and out. They left 2 minutes and 41 seconds left on the clock as they punted the ball away, obviously being in bad field position. But Detroit took advantage of that fully. They went on an 8-play drive, and they finished it off with a game-winning field goal that ultimately got us to 31-29. And you look at that 2-point conversion right off of the bat, and you might think, well, if you hit that, obviously this game's tied. But I didn't think that was a huge deal because they probably would have lost anyway if they hit it. If they hit that and the 2 drives end up like they did with the Lions punting and the Vikings also punting, this is still like a tie game anyway. So I didn't really think that was a big deal. But the second to last drive, like I said, was really crucial to me because in that moment at home and everything like that, knowing that you just basically almost took away their last gasp of air trying to come back into this game, and you have the ball ideally last in that situation and you try to convert a first down, it was a failed moment for me, just because if you're not going to convert, if you're not going to get into field goal range or anything like that, at least take some more time off of the clock. But again, credit to Detroit's defense for making it hard on the Vikings, but it was a quick 3 and out that I feel like really gave the Lions life, and they obviously took advantage of it by having then the last drive officially of the game and kicking that game-winning field goal. But it was too quick, especially because the Lions only needed 3 points to win the game. It went too fast for me. But what I found really impressive from the Lions goes back to those 3 touchdowns that we saw in the second quarter, because all of those were not only touchdowns, obviously, right? But they were all 5+ plays drives. They were all 5 or more plays in each of those drives, and they were each 69 or more yards for each drive, which really is asserting your dominance. 3 straight drives and kind of punch back in a major way after you're down 10-0. It was probably the best offense in the NFL. I don't think that's too crazy to say. And it's constantly also finding those answers to the blitzes, which the Vikings are notorious to doing. A lot of different looks that they give at the line of scrimmage. And for the Lions to be so well prepared to find the answers and find quick receptions to each of those blitzes is another reason why, Ben Johnson and just this offense that they've built with Amon-Ra, with Jameer, and the best offensive line in the NFL. It's hard to think of a better situation. And also on the defensive end, I can't fail to mention Brian Branch, who has been playing amazing. If you don't know who that is, number 32 for the Lions, a safety sort of slot corner that does it all for them. He had an interception in this game, and he's just been playing great as well on the defensive side of the ball. But I think at this point, I would say that the Lions are the best team in the NFC. Before this, I picked the Vikings to win this game, so they would have been the best team in the NFC. But from what I saw from the Lions, standing up to this defense, they're probably the most complete team in the NFC, or they just have such a powerful offense that it's hard to beat them, even if they do give up like 29 points or something, or even more points against the Seahawks. It almost doesn't matter. But I'm not giving up hope or mailing it in on the Vikings. These 2 teams are probably the 2 best in the NFC. And arguably the Packers are the 3rd best, which is insane for how good that division is and how good the Packers are looking. All of those games are going to be awesome. They're probably all going to end up like these scores and these kind of numbers that we have for these players. But the Lions take this one. The Vikings beat the Packers in a high-scoring game. Now they lose a high-scoring game to the Lions. And once the Lions play the Packers, it's probably going to be more of the same, which is going to be awesome. But we'll leave that game there. One of the best games that we had in the slate yesterday. But we have one more game to go over. The scoreline doesn't suggest a great game, but the storyline around the Eagles and the Giants game, we had to talk about it. Saquon reminding everybody in New York why they should have re-signed him. Big performance from him, but also a lot of just bad moments for the Giants that we're going to talk about. So that'll be the last thing we mention on today's show. We'll be right back quickly after this break. Thank you for joining me here on the last segment of today's show. Our last recap on today's episode falls very close to where I'm at right now in New York, where the Eagles had a very convincing 28-3 win over the New York Giants. And yesterday we saw Giants owner John Mara's worst nightmare, which he foreshadowed a little bit on Hard Knocks over in the spring. his worst nightmare came true yesterday as his former franchise player, ran all over them at his former house as well. And Philadelphia now wins back-to-back games off of their bye week to go to 4-2, while the Giants lose their second straight game to fall to 2-5. And on Saquon Barkley, obviously, it's funny because that quote is going to be so famous, right, by John Mara, when he's talking to general manager Joe Schoen, and he said that he's going to have trouble sleeping at night if Saquon ends up in Philadelphia, and for good reason, obviously. I think anybody that knows anything about Saquon, about the Eagles, and the amount of talent that they have, for this situation to happen, and for it actually to become true, everybody knew what was going to happen, right? I'm sure Saquon was probably the most bet on person to score yesterday, because you knew exactly what this was going to be, and for, again, the Giants to just let him walk out the door, and for them to be salty about him joining Philly, if you were going to feel hard about that or feel some sort of ill will against Saquon, like a lot of Giants fans did, burning his jersey and everything, don't let him walk out the door. Don't let him leave that building, being unquestionably the best player that organization has had for a while. Who else can you really blame except themselves for letting a guy like their franchise player walk out the door? And their owner, John Mara, knew what was coming. He knew how bad this could be, and he was forced to watch it in his own stadium yesterday, which was you can only imagine what he was going through. You could feel bad for John Mara too a little bit, admittedly. But looking at the game that Saquon had, right, looking at the performance that he showed and reminded his former team of what he was capable of. 17 carries for 176 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. He probably could have had 4 if they didn't push like 2 or 3 times, but I'm sure they probably didn't want to rub it in their face too much in New York as well. Saquon almost had a career high in rushing yards. His career high is 189 back in 2019 against the Commanders, but he was basically almost there, and it was, again, something I'm sure we all saw coming, which was not great for the Giants also. Also in this game, the Eagles recorded 8 sacks to the Giants 4, and the first quarter was just a sack fest of defensive performance. Just nothing was going on in that first quarter. It wasn't too exciting, but for as bad as the first quarter was, the Giants overall continue to be pretty bad at home. They have 0 wins at home in their last 4 games and only 1 touchdown scored. And I think the stats everywhere where Daniel Jones, I think, has 640 something days or something like that since he's contributed to a touchdown at MetLife Stadium. That combined with the game that Saquon had, I think just writes the story itself about the decisions that the Giants have made internally and building this roster, letting a guy like Saquon go. All those stats are just constant reminders, right, of what could have been, probably what should have been, and things like that. So it's crazy just that this is so real, that this is the kind of reality that we're living in. And now the Giants are going to have to live with this, for the next 3 or 4 years while Saquon's there. But will Casper, Pitts, or Njoku the rest of the season? Probably. Njoku had a pretty decent game, but the Browns, not looking great for them. Maybe, I said that, but I think I might go with Njoku. I think they're, for as weird as it sounds, for a team like the Browns, 1-6 now, I believe, guy like Jameis or DTR playing, I feel like they'd use Njoku a bit more. I don't think that was just a fluke, so I would go with Njoku. I think Pitts has too much talent around him to really put up crazy numbers, and Njoku's probably their best receiver, so I would go with Njoku. But here to just recap this game quickly, both defenses, like I said, showing out in that first quarter. 6 punts between the both of them to start off the game. It wasn't until the second quarter where Saquon broke off a few big runs to get the Eagles offense going. Saquon scored the first touchdown, making it 7-0 on one of those big drives that he kind of got going. And Philadelphia added on to Saquon's first touchdown the very next drive with a touchdown to A.J. Brown, a 41-yard touchdown to make it 14-0. And it really didn't get too much better from there. Out of the Giants' 12 possessions that they had, they were all punts except one field goal that they got, obviously the 3 points. And Jalen Hurts ran 2 more tush-push touchdowns in during the second half, making it 28-3. And Daniel Jones was yanked in the fourth quarter. Afterwards, he said he wasn't too happy about it because he just wanted to be out there. But, I mean, at 28-3, the way that things were going, I didn't think it really mattered who was out there. But Daniel Jones wasn't too happy about it. But Brian Daboll did clarify that he is going to be the starter going forward if there was any doubt. I'm sure there is doubt, obviously, when he gets pulled. But Brian Daboll made sure to calm all those concerns down, and he will be the starter going forward. But Daniel Jones was not a fan of getting pulled. But this was surprisingly the Giants' lowest points scored all season, even worse than the performance they had in Week 1, where they only scored 6 points. They were only able to score 3 points. Their 2 lowest point totals of the year so far have been at home, which is pretty insane also. But for the Eagles, a bit more positively, back-to-back games where the Eagles defense hasn't allowed a single touchdown, albeit against the Browns and albeit against the Giants. Still, I'm with the game against the Bucs and whatnot, and not really getting any pressure. It looks like they're getting a lot more of it from a guy like Bryce Huff, right? We're mentioning him a lot more. Jalen Carter imposing his will a bit more. They're getting a lot more from their pass rush, so it's making it look a lot better. And the run defense has been pretty good as well. But what stood out the most to me, other than the fact that, you know, this is the most Giant thing to happen for the Eagles, is that they need to carry on going forward being this relentless with the running game, right? Not just for this game, because obviously you want Saquon. There was a little bit of that personal relationship right there because you wanted Saquon to have a good game. You wanted to give him that pity game ball like it has been thrown around in the NFL, where you play a former team, head coach, assistant coordinator, or something like that, former player plays their former team. You wanted to give him that game ball, right? But it shouldn't just be the fact that you're playing the Giants, right, for Saquon. In this game, it was 45 carries overall for all runners compared to 15 passing attempts. And it doesn't have to be so egregious like that, but I think definitely this Eagles team should favor the running game a lot more going forward. I shouldn't really see Jalen throwing 10 or 15 more times than they run the ball in any circumstance because of what this team has shown to be so far through the year, right? If you, of course, you never trailed against the Giants or the Browns, 2 bad teams, all in all. So you stuck with the running game, right? It was easier to stick with the running game when you're leading, when you feel like you're dominating them. But even in games where maybe you go down in the first quarter, and we know the Eagles, right, they haven't scored a single point in that first quarter. But if that's still going to be the case, say that's the narrative all year, right, for the Eagles, that they're not going to score a single point in the first quarter. If you run the ball, and you're going to be good at running the ball, right, because you have Saquon, because that offensive line is so good. If you don't score points in the first quarter and you just go on these long drives and you just wind the clock down, at least you don't fall so far behind where the game against the Bucs or other games where you're playing better opposition on the offensive side of the ball. If you're not going to score in the first quarter, at least run the ball yourself to give yourself a chance to stay in the game longer. And then as you get more into the game, you get more out of A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and all these great weapons that you have. At least you're not trying to chase the game that you're down 3 or 2 scores right at that point, because if you run the ball pretty significantly and pretty effectively as well, you at least kind of create some momentum that way. And even if it doesn't work out the first couple of drives, keep trying it, because if it just makes it a lot closer rather than going quick 3 and outs. Your defense is back out there on the field, and maybe they just don't have it that day, and then you find yourself down 17, 14, nothing, and you have Jalen pass the ball a lot more, and then it becomes predictable, one-dimensional, and it leads to bad performances. A lot of criticism falling on Jalen, where I just feel like they need to be more relentless with the running game to give themselves a better chance. And they're going to score in the first quarter, obviously, eventually, but they need to help out their defense as much as possible, especially with their defense showing a bit of life now. The more they run the ball, the fresher they are. And maybe they build up these leads now if they run the ball a bit more, giving their pass rush that free pass to kind of pin their ears back and rush the passer freely, knowing that they have a lead to play with. So I feel like all of that has to do with the running game. And again, it doesn't have to be 45 carries to 15 passing attempts, but if it does have it be more in favor of the running game, if you have 5 or 10 more carries each and every game than you do passing attempts, I wouldn't be surprised if they're within a score in a lot of these games, or if they win a lot of these games for that reason. And, this game, they're not going to take too much. Game really is something that this Eagles team should really focus on. If they carry that on going forward when they're going to play Washington and, the Cowboys in some of these games, and I don't know who else they have on their schedule, but it's really going to help a lot. I truly believe that for this Eagles team, getting their offense more of a groove, it should be something that they should take advantage of a lot more going forward. But this was a good win for them. They're 4-2 now, trying to keep pace with the Commanders. But that'll be all that we have on today's show. Thank you guys for joining me on today's episode of the Chip Shot Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Make sure to tune into all the shows each and every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on all forms of social media. And if you want to see more of this show, not just the live shows, check out both YouTube channels, the GSMC Sports Network channel and the GSMC Podcast Network channel, for a lot more content around the NFL in a variety of different ways. But we'll be back tomorrow, same time at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, to fully recap both Monday Night Football games and talk some more about the games on Sunday with myself, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thank you guys for joining me, and we'll see you guys all back here again tomorrow to fully recap Week 7 of the NFL.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit and the